The doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent diseases with nutrition. These are the words of Thomas Edison roughly a century ago. Yet today, the World Health Organization projects that over the next 3 years, the market wealth of the pharmaceutical industry will grow from $300 billion to $400 billion. This is a clear indicator that we're not treating our health with nutrition. In fact, we're just trying to cure our problems with medicine. There's plenty of empirical evidence that has come about since Thomas Edison that shows us what we should be eating. The problem is, we've got it all wrong. We've been misinformed. What we've been told is that we should eat a balanced diet, and this so-called balanced diet is low in fat, high in carbohydrates, especially from whole grains and whole wheat products. The problem with this is that a lot of the foods that fit into our food pyramid are processed. And these processed foods are what is contributing to the demise of our health. So today we're going to examine specifically macronutrients. Macronutrients are fat, carbs, and proteins, or the large-scale foods that make up our diets. And we'll look at how these foods affect our health. The first vilified of these macronutrients is fat. Fat is an essential nutrient that gets a bad rap, but it's really important for our bodies. In fact, 60% of our brain is made up of fat. There's an interesting study that was done by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition way back in 1981. They examined two populations that lived on Polynesian atolls. These two populations lived off the land, so they ate a lot of foods from coconuts, which led to their diet being very rich in fat. About 35 to 50% of their calories came from fat. And of these fats, a lot of them were saturated from the coconut. You would think that a population that eats like this would be overweight and have cardiovascular health problems, but in fact what they found was the total opposite. These populations were very lean, they had no indicators of heart disease, kidney disease, colon cancer, arteriosclerosis, or digestive problems. Saturated fat is often considered a bad fat, but as we can see from this study, it's really not that bad. The only bad fat is trans fat. Trans fat is fat that's been processed or partially hydrogenated. And through this process of hydrogenization, it makes it so our bodies are not able to process it very well, and we end up storing it as fat under our skin. Dietary fat is very different from body fat. Just because you eat foods that are rich in fat doesn't mean that fat's going to be stored underneath your skin as body fat. Another fat that gets a bad rap is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a building block of every single cell membrane in our bodies. It's also an important nutrient in our diet as it regulates hormones. The interesting relationship between dietary cholesterol and our blood cholesterol is as we eat more cholesterol, our bodies produce less of it. So foods like eggs that are rich in cholesterol, we're told not to eat too much of because the yolks have so much cholesterol in them. But really what happens as you eat foods like eggs or other foods rich in cholesterol is your body simply makes less cholesterol in your blood and uses the cholesterol that you get from your food instead. High fat diets are only bad in context. So the context needs to be in relationship to what other macronutrients you're consuming. The next one we'll look at is carbohydrates. The government says, according to our food pyramid and through the dietitians and even the media, that we should eat lots of grains and whole wheat foods. We've been eating wheat for thousands of years as humans, but the wheat we've been eating in recent years has changed from the wheat that we ate a long time ago. The grains we eat now are all processed, so they lack the protein, zinc, iron, magnesium, and selenium that previous wheat products had. One of the problems that leads to this lack of nutrition is the fact that the demand for wheat has gone up so much. We now use strains of wheat that are very high yield, meaning that we're able to produce them for a low cost. The problem is they have no nutritional value. Another problem is we used to soak and ferment our grains and even sprout them. But nowadays we simply process them as fast as we can and remove the germ and bran from the endosperm. What this leaves us with is simply a starchy carbohydrate that when we introduce into our bodies, it gets converted into glucose or sugar. And as is pretty well known, simply eating sugar is not good for you. So eating processed grains is not really good for you either. We've been told that a balanced breakfast can include cereal, but it doesn't take someone with an MD to know that Lucky Charms are not a part of a good breakfast. They have a whole grain stamp on them that has been put on there by the government, but maybe they're not actually looking out for our health. Here's a picture from a commercial, and this was once called a balanced breakfast. You may have heard part of this complete breakfast. Of this diet of cereal, milk, juice, and buttered toast, there's over 600 calories. About 13 of these calories come from fat, 15 from protein, and 66 grams of sugar are also in this meal. 66 grams of sugar is not a part of any complete breakfast. So again, we need to look at our diet in context. Cereal is not going to kill you by itself, but if you eat it with a plethora of other bad foods and with a lot of frequency, it's not going to be good for you. Besides the fat and carbohydrates we looked at, we need to look at protein. Protein, besides water, protein is the most abundant molecule in your body. It makes up all of our tissues and is most known for being a contributor to muscles. The interesting thing about protein is that it uses different metabolic pathways. So when we eat protein, our body actually uses calories to digest the protein more so than fats and carbohydrates. Another good thing about eating protein in these different metabolic pathways is that it signals to our brain that we're full and satisfied, so we gorge less on other bad foods. One good source of protein, of course, is meat, and meat is often vilified, especially red meat. We think red meat is bad, that it will cause cancer or cardiovascular disease, but this is not necessarily true. The Harvard School of Public Health examined 20 different studies, which included over 1.2 million people, and all these studies were related to the consumption of meat and cardiovascular health. What they found was there was a correlation between eating meat and these diseases, but there was no causation. A lot of these studies included processed meats like sausage and bacon, and these processed meats also are eaten by people who have other bad eating habits. Through these studies, they found that eating unprocessed meat is actually good for your diet and your body, because meat contains B vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids, zinc, iron, selenium, and creatine, which is all important for your brain and your muscles. Another thing about meat that we're told is that eating too much of it is bad for our kidneys. Unless you have a pre-existing kidney condition, meat will not harm your body. In fact, it does the opposite, because eating meat reduces your likelihood for obesity, from suppressing your appetite, lowers your risk of diabetes and blood pressure. These are all contributors that lead to kidney health. So in conclusion, the only bad foods that you can eat are processed. Processed fats or trans fats are bad. Processed carbohydrates in foods like cereals are bad. And processed meats, things like sausage and bacon, are also bad. Eating a natural diet, eating natural foods, is not bad for you. So as a consumer, you should find credible research that comes from sources like universities and public health journals that are not out for a profit. They're not looking for industrial money to publicize their research. A lot of publicly introduced studies are funded by the wheat growers who want you to buy their wheat products. So do your own research and find out what's best for you. I'll leave you with one more quote, this one from Anne Wigmore. She said, "The food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison."